Good morning. The last several days, whether you've been watching the videos or following the blog at Ancestral Souls Wisdom School, I'm talking a lot about trauma in our family history. Personal trauma, collective trauma, what our ancestors experienced, things they didn't digest, process, integrate, and heal that were passed down through the DNA. Now, one of the layers of this, there are so many layers, and I'm getting ready to do a class on some of this in August. So if you're interested in exploring this at an introductory level, then watch for this class to be announced. But there's a layer of perspective and also experience that we need to look at when we look at the trauma in our tree, and especially in our living family, because everyone does not respond the same to a traumatic event. Some of it is based on the perspective we have about life, living reality in the world. Some of it is based on the traumas that we carry from our childhood, adolescence, total of our life. Then add into that the ancestral traumas that get passed down. Add into that maybe resilience or some of the negative ways that our ancestors coped with things like shutting down, keeping secrets, telling lies, not talking about it, shaming anybody who was asking questions. And we can see a lot of these patterns are playing out in the collective today. So I want to give you an example of how this might play out in a family and what the different perspectives might be and why people do not always respond the same way. So let's just say there are 3 children in a family, and the father has rage issues, anger issues, unresolved trauma from his childhood that maybe nobody knows about. And of the 3 children, maybe he takes his anger and everything out on the first child. Okay, the other 2 are not really affected, or they're too young, or they come along later, or they just see a completely different side, or they've blocked out whatever they've seen and experienced. Okay, so we have at least one child who's being maybe verbally, mentally, physically, other kinds of abuse, and we have 2 that maybe aren't, or maybe they are in some way. Maybe some of these kinds of things like verbal and emotional abuse get spread on all 3 of them. Now let's say that that father passes away. It could be sudden and unexpected, or it could be after a long illness. However it happens, each of those 3 children are going to have a different experience with that death. They're going to have different thoughts, beliefs, and emotions over who their father was in this life, how they felt about him. One of them might feel relief that he is gone, that even though maybe all of the abuse ended years before, this person that they identify maybe even as a monster or whatever label they want to put on him is no longer there. Maybe it's a relief, but they still have trauma within them that still needs to be processed and healed. The other 2 might not see it as a relief or a blessing. They might be very shook up by this. And depending on the point and the age in the life that the father passes away, these children might have trouble understanding what happened, processing. They may go into their own trauma response of freezing up or wanting to run away, shutting down, whatever it is that they're going to do to protect themselves so that they can make it through and process the events that have to happen around the death. This is also why when we interview family members and we ask about a certain maybe grandfather or aunt or uncle or anybody, we might get, if we're interviewing 2 or 3 or 4 different siblings, we might get completely different stories because they all had different experiences. They all saw things through a certain lens because of the things that they carried within them, the beliefs that they had, how they felt about the person, and what the relationship was between them and the person. So it does add a little bit of complexity to our research. And we see the same thing in military research. If you have 2 guys in a foxhole and they're both facing forward, and then all of a sudden the battle begins, one guy goes this way, the other guy goes this way, they're now looking at 2 different battle scenes. So when you interview them, you're going to get 2 different ideas of what happened. And they're both probably right, because they're both from that experience that they had, which wasn't the same. So whether you are looking at your personal history, you're looking at the military history of what happened in your family, and you're reading all of these different reports about what happened, or even if there was an accident that your family was involved in, you're reading newspaper accounts, you might still see different versions of what happened. All of these things make up who we are. They make up the stories that we tell about ourselves, about our ancestors, and they influence some of the healing that we do. So I invite you today to look at your research and maybe identify the places, maybe even just one ancestor, where you've heard different stories. And now maybe take it a little bit deeper and maybe do a little bit of digging and try and find out, well, what really happened with this ancestor to make them who they were? You know, if we could go back in time, I would definitely love to know how my great-grandmother Bessie became who she was. Because almost every picture I've seen of her, she looks very angry. And she was a Czech woman, and she was, you know, well, she was who she was, and she was very stern, and she always had her hair back in a bun in these pictures. But except for one wedding picture that I see her and she's smiling. The rest of them, I don't know what happened to her. But she definitely did not come across as a happy person. And the things I heard about her when she died really do make me wonder what happened to her and why did she carry so much anger. But we can't go back in time and ask them, but we can do the research, and then we can go within and just see what our intuition is telling us. And what information do we need to know right now just to heal this and move on, move out of this pattern or this belief or this negative emotion that keeps cropping up in our lives and our families. So I invite you to do that today. And if you'd like to learn more about this, check out my YouTube. The link is in the bio for all of my social media sites, my upcoming classes, and the Ancestral Souls Wisdom School for blog articles. And then, of course, the World War II Research and Writing Center, where I do talk a lot more about the military side of the trauma in our families. Lots of articles there going back to 2015. So I invite you to take a look if you're interested. And if you'd like to do an introductory exploration of some of this trauma in our families, then watch for my announcement about my upcoming class. I think it's something every genealogist, family history researcher, military researcher, whatever you want to label yourself, I think we all need to be looking at these things. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you tomorrow.